Today we're going to be looking at a really important topic, and that is the breath and its relationship to jaw pain, headaches, neck pain, neck stiffness, all kinds of other symptoms that you might be getting in your head and your face. So this is kind of like a big subject, so we're just going to condense it down into a few areas so that this video doesn't go on for too long, and just talk about why the breath is so important when it comes to the head and the neck. So my name is Ellie Lindsay, and I'm a myofascial therapist for TMJ disorder and headaches. And I just like to bring you some of the techniques that I use with my clients so that you can apply them to your day-to-day life at home. So understanding the breath's role, actually not just in the symptoms that we're talking about here, but in our everyday health, is quite a revelation really. And it's something that we can just access so easily. You know, it takes a few seconds to tune into the breath, and we can do it at any time. So it's actually really important, and I can't really stress how important it is. But let's sort of take it back to the symptoms that we've been talking about. So jaw pain, headaches, neck pain, neck stiffness, discomfort, migraines, those kind of symptoms, and just sort of uncover why the breath is so important there. So the first thing to really think about is that when we breathe quite up high here in our chest area, we're actually using different muscle structures to what we are when we're breathing quite low in our chest here, so quite low into the diaphragm. So when we're up here with our breath, which most of us are in our sort of day-to-day stressing, rushing from one place to another lives that we live in this Western world, we're actually using a different set of muscles, and one of those key sets of muscles is called the scalenes, which actually are neck muscles, and they come all the way down here and they attach to the first and the second rib. So every time we take a sort of shallow high breath, so when I say high breath, I'm talking about one that fills up our lungs sort of at the top here of our chest. Every time we're taking one of those, we're activating and using the scalenes muscles. And why that is relevant, one of the reasons it's relevant, there are lots of reasons, is that these scalenes muscles can get overworked, and they can get tight, and they can get tension in them. And the more tightness and tension that those scalenes muscles have, the more they pull our heads forward. So this really affects our posture. And the more our heads are pulled forwards, the more likely we are to be compressing at the back of our necks here. Some of the muscles there which refer pain into the head, and even can affect the nerve as well that feeds the face. So that's quite a complex, a sort of step by step why the high breath is not that great for us. So the scalenes muscles get overused, and that affects the head position, basically, is a really simple way of explaining that. And then another way that the breath really affects the jaw in particular, I found this so interesting when I sort of read about this and researched this, is actually if we are breathing through our mouth, so if we're kind of, chronic mouth breathers, which, I grew up being a mouth breather, what actually happens is over time, years and years and years of this, our cheeks actually sort of get drawn in very slightly when we mouth breathe, and that actually can affect the shape of your jaw. So if you're a nose breather, you're much likely to have quite a wide jaw, so the palates of your jaw will be quite wide. You'll have quite a lot of space for your teeth and quite a kind of a wide jaw. If you're more of a mouth breather, and you have been for some time, then it actually causes a narrowing of the mouth. So if you kind of have a think about your jaw and the shape of it, if it's quite rounded, then it's much more likely that you've been able to nose breathe. If it's quite narrow and kind of this sort of shape, then it's much more likely that you've been breathing through your mouth for most of your life. And then what happens if the top jaw has to adjust to that, the bottom jaw has to adjust with it in order for our teeth to function. And that often causes this bottom jaw to be pulled back a little bit so that the mouth can close. So if you have if your bottom teeth, when your mouth is closed, sits behind your front teeth, then it's quite likely that this bottom jaw is being pulled backwards in order to fit with the top. So I hope that makes some kind of sense. I tried to break that down into a simple explanation, but I'm not sure if I did very well with that. So just let me know if it doesn't. Yeah, and then the other thing with the breath, so we're going to cover 3 main areas. We've covered about the muscles, we've covered about the actual shape of the jaw being affected from whether we nose breathe or mouth breathe. And then the third thing we're going to talk about is the stress response, because the stress response is so important to chronic pain and actually being able to navigate in and out of a stress response. So having a healthy nervous system that allows for that to happen is really important. And one of the key things in our body, the structures in our body that allows for that kind of change because sometimes we need to be stressed, but we should be able to come out of that stress in a nice sort of flowing way. And many of us are stuck in that sort of fight or flight type of nervous system response. So the key structure for actually enabling that flow is called the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is actually able to be activated by changes in the breath. So the more that we can going back to that low breath, the more that we take sort of low calming breaths, the more the vagus nerve will actually help bring us back into rest and digest and out of fights and flights. And often, there's so much research around sort of inflammation levels and stress. I even read that around sort of areas of pain, like stress hormones have actually been found kind of like grouping up around those areas. So there's more and more research now showing that chronic stress is so related to pain, and a lot of that does come back to the breath, and we can really use the breath as a way to combat that, really. So I hope that made some sense. That was 3 reasons why the breath is so important when it comes to jaw pain, headaches, neck pain, even, like overall body pain and aches and things like fibromyalgia. So one key way just to get you started with listening to your breath is to have a lay down on the floor and just take your hands onto your belly and just notice where your breath is. Like, can you feel the up and down movements of the breath in your diaphragm here, or does it feel more like it's coming from higher up in the chest area? And then just take a few minutes just to tune in, and then just see if you can actually develop some change there. And think about aiming the breath into your hands. Just doing that whenever you can, You don't even have to lay down to do it. You can be sitting down and you can just take yourself through that exercise. And then what happens is the more that you do that, the more we're actually able to develop new habits. And I'll be giving you some other techniques to really help with the breath as well over the next few weeks. But I really wanted to just share why this work is so important. So I hope that those 3 reasons made some sense to you. There's quite a lot of information just crammed together. So you just let me know if you have any questions on that.